This podcast is solely for the attention of institutional, professional, qualified, or sophisticated investors and distributors.
Hi everyone, today we're going to come back to the key messages of the World Energy Outlook that the International Energy Agency, the IEA, published at the end of October. We'll only talk about the key messages because this 524-page report is extraordinarily rich and it is difficult to be exhaustive about it. The opening words of the World Energy Outlook 2022 set the tone. The report begins with, "The world is in the midst of its first global energy crisis, a shock of unprecedented breadth and complexity." The report makes clear that the pressures on energy markets had begun before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but that it has sharply exacerbated them, especially since Russia was by far the world's largest exporter of fossil fuels. This crisis, which has led to $2 trillion in additional profit in 2022 compared to 2021 for fossil fuel producers, obviously has dramatic consequences for the poorest populations. It has led to a sharp rise in food insecurity in many developing countries, since food prices are closely linked to energy prices. But it goes much further, since 75 million people in the world who had recently obtained access to electricity are likely to lose it because of rising prices. The IEA points out that this is the very first time since they have been tracking this statistic that the number of people worldwide without access to electricity has started to rise again. In addition, 100 million more people will once again have to rely on firewood for cooking instead of cleaner and healthier options. It is true that governments have mobilized $500 billion in aid to cushion the shock of rising energy prices, but this mainly concerns developed countries, and there is therefore widening of inequalities between rich and poor countries. A big question raised by the World Energy Outlook is, will the energy crisis accelerate or delay the energy transition? The energy transition has been sometimes accused of having exacerbated the rise in prices, but the IEA explains, and this is moreover demonstrated in a recent IMF working paper, that energy prices had risen less in countries where the share of renewable energies is greater. The IEA notes that some countries have accelerated the energy transition due to the crisis. According to its calculations, with the decisions that have been taken, the annual investment in clean energies would reach $2 trillion in 2030, that is to say around 50% more than currently. The Inflation Reduction Act adopted this summer in the US plays an important role, but we have also to mention the acceleration of the deployment of renewables in Europe, but also in India, where it is very spectacular. For the first time, the World Energy Outlook predicts, based on the decisions taken, that the demand for each fossil fuel will experience a decline or a stagnation over its forecast horizon. The demand for coal is expected to fall in the coming years, the demand for natural gas is expected to stabilize toward the end of the decade, and the demand for oil is expected to peak in the mid-2030s before declining slightly due to the widespread use of electric vehicles. This is really historic, since fossil fuels and economic growth have been closely linked since the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. Energy-related carbon emissions are expected to peak around 2025 before slowly declining. This is much better than what was anticipated a few years ago, notably thanks to the acceleration of governments and technological progress. But unfortunately, this is still not enough to limit global warming. In the net zero scenario in 2050, more than $4 trillion in annual investment in clean energies should be achieved by 2030. And unfortunately, it is in poor countries and in emerging countries that the investments are insufficient. Apart from China, investments in clean energy by these countries have not increased at all since the signing of the Paris Agreement in 2015. This is therefore a real need for new support mechanism in this area. Finally, the IEA concludes by saying that energy markets and policies have changed profoundly as a result of the invasion of Ukraine, not just this year, but for the decades to come. There was already no doubt on the environmental level that the energy transition had to be accelerated, but today it is also an economic necessity since clean technologies are more competitive than ever, and it is also clearly an issue of sovereignty. There is therefore an alignment of economic, climate and security priorities. Thank you for listening and talk to you soon.
All comments and analysis reflect CPR AM views on market conditions and its evolution, according to information known at the time. As a result of the simplified nature of the information contained in this document, that information is necessarily partial and incomplete.